Revolutions are often remembered as violent uprisings or sudden political collapses. However, some of the most transformative revolutions unfolded quietly through conversations, shared ideas, and public spaces. Between 1500 and 1800, Europe experienced a dramatic intellectual shift known as the Age of Reason. While the ideas of the Age of Reason are often associated with famous scientists and philosophers, their ideas of revolution, reaction, and reform spread most effectively in an unexpected place, the coffeehouse. Coffeehouses revolutionized European history by creating inclusive public spaces where information was shared and ideas were developed, reformed, and spread freely, challenging traditional authority and ultimately inspiring revolutions such as the American and French revolutions.
For centuries, European society relied on traditional and religious authority. Absolute monarchies claimed legitimacy through the divine right of kings, while religious leaders asserted sole authority over spiritual matters. However, in the 16th century, natural philosophers such as Copernicus, Galileo, Bacon, and Descartes revolutionized this worldview by proposing that truth could be proven by observing and analyzing evidence. No idea was safe from their scrupulous questioning. Descartes even questioned his own existence with the infamous quote, "I think, therefore I am," realizing that the doubt of his existence was proof that he did, in fact, exist. Their questioning laid a foundation for the scientific method.
The development of the scientific method encouraged discourse in science, of course, but also in religion, economics, social hierarchies, and government. However, traditional institutions, such as universities, discouraged radical thinking and experimentation. And through royal societies of science, such as the Academy of London and the French Royal Society allowed scientific research, scientists were from the elite classes and were not allowed to question the authority of their patrons, the government. So what about the common man? Where might he freely form, share, and debate revolutionary ideas? Along came coffee, and its home, the coffeehouse. What does coffee have to do with revolutionary ideas, you might ask? Let's take a look into the history of this tiny bean that changed the intellectual course of mankind.
Coffee originated in Ethiopia. Legend describes a sheep herder who discovered the energizing effects of coffee berries on his goats. By the 15th century, coffee had spread throughout the Ottoman Empire and was soon traded by the Venetians. By the mid-16th century, coffee was in the British Isles where the first coffee house opened in Oxford, stimulating and sharpening the minds of university students there.
So I'm a pediatric endocrinologist. I've been board certified for 23 years now in practice. And in pediatric endocrinology, I take care of children with various hormone conditions. Yeah, I think that is easy to answer. Yes, it can. I don't think that's an opinion. I think that it's known that it does enhance cognitive function, especially alertness, reaction time, things of that nature.
2 centuries later, in the 1700s, there were over 80 coffee houses in London. These perky places were promoted by advertisements like the virtue of the coffee drink that touted the benefits of coffee from aiding with memory and drowsiness to helping digestion and curing a multitude of illnesses. Coffee was seen as a medicinal tonic that could make one smarter. Coffee houses were even referred to as penny universities because they offered periodicals, pamphlets, and discussion for the price of a single cup.
Patrons to coffeehouses read and debated periodicals such as The Spectator that were designed specifically for coffeehouses. They shaped public opinion on politics and social behavior and spread revolutionary ideas throughout Western Europe. Coffeehouses also welcomed people from different social classes, encouraging diverse perspectives. Philosophers, merchants, scientists, and writers were free to develop, circulate, and debate their revolutionary ideas over cups of coffee. It is interesting to note that coffeehouses also attracted like-minded individuals. London's Grecian Coffee House attracted members of the Royal Society of London. Just a 5-minute walk from the Royal Society, Isaac Newton and Robert Boyle were frequent patrons. Legend even says they once dissected a dolphin on a coffee table. Politicians and lawyers frequented Alice's Coffee House, conveniently located next to Westminster. Even merchants had their favorite haunt, Lloyd's Coffee House on Fleet Street. Lloyd's was a meeting spot for merchants and sailors who used the coffeehouse to discuss politics and economics. They often bet on risks taken by merchant ships and their precious cargo, becoming the world's first insurance brokers.
As the coffeehouse culture of London continued to expand in the 18th century, a crucial character on the timeline of the Coffeehouse Revolution visited London. Montesquieu, the great French philosopher who proposed the concept of separation of powers and checks and balances, lived temporarily in London from 1729 to 1731. During this visit, Montesquieu wrote his notes on the English, the foundation for his great work, The Spirit of Laws. In his notes, Montesquieu tells that he met the king, commenting that the monarch's powers were limited, granting freedom to his subjects. Montesquieu argued that the English were, quote, free because the prince lacks the power to inflict any wrong imaginable upon anybody at all, since his power is controlled and limited by statute, end quote. In his witty fashion, Montesquieu even joked that the monarchy had found a way to profit from this freedom because, quote, the king levies a duty on all periodicals and there are about 50 of them, so he gets paid every time he is insulted. And remember that these periodicals were readily available for a penny at any coffeehouse in London. Hence, Montesquieu believed that England was, quote, the freest country in the world.
When Montesquieu returned to France under an absolute monarchy, he began to write The Spirit of Laws, where he introduced to the world the idea of limited government. He argued that only if the power of the monarch, legislature, and the courts are limited by each other can a people be free. These ideas launched the Enlightenment and later inspired philosophers like Voltaire and Rousseau to continue reform and revolutionize the ideas of what makes a civil society.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American colonists were becoming increasingly dissatisfied with their colonial rulers, the English. American colonists were citizens of the British Empire but had no representation in Parliament, and they were aggressively taxed, knowing that the colonists had no representation to oppose such taxes. Hence the cry, no taxation without representation. Throughout the 1760s and 1770s, American intellectuals such as Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton expressed discontent with the unfairness of these taxes while reading the works of Locke, Montesquieu, Voltaire, and Rousseau.
In 1773, the Boston Tea Party initiated a boycott on tea that led these intellectuals to coffeehouses. Coffee was seen as patriotic, and coffeehouses became organizing centers of resistance. It is not surprising that a man who frequented France on both personal and professional business, Thomas Jefferson, wrote in the Declaration of Independence that the British government was tyrannical because the colonies had no voice to speak out or check the powers of their colonial government. Even after the United States earned its freedom, it continued to implement the ideas of these philosophers in the U.S. Constitution. They established 3 branches of government who could check each other's power and secured the rights of all citizens.
In the meantime, back in France, coffeehouses had become all the rage. Parisian coffeehouses provided pamphlets criticizing the monarchy and were often read aloud and debated. It was in the previously mentioned Le Procope on the left bank that the Jacobins and their leader Maximilien Robespierre formed a debating club to discuss politics. These discussions helped mobilize public opinion and contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789, ending the authoritarianism of the old regime and launching the modern age.
Some may ask, why not tea? Tea is caffeinated and was brought to Europe about the same time as coffee. However, tea grew in China, and the expense to import the product was very high. The only people who could afford such a luxurious beverage were the privileged classes, such as aristocrats, landowners, and the bourgeoisie. So, coffee was the preferred drink of the common man.
Okay, but what about taverns? Yes, alcohol-serving taverns were important places for social gatherings. Indeed, by the late 16th century, gin had become widely available in taverns. Because gin was cultivated and produced in Europe, it was an inexpensive drink that anyone could purchase and brought the common people together. In fact, a gin craze hit London around the same time as the Coffeehouse Revolution. So why didn't gin impact the world in a similar way to coffee? The answer is found in its chemistry. Gin is simply a depressant and coffee a stimulant. Therefore, gin reduces cognitive function while coffee increases it.
Very interesting. I think alcohol at a societal level, probably back at the time that you're thinking about in the 17th centuries or before, was more common, right? Also meant that the impact of alcohol on young individuals, adults, in terms of its impact to the brain and the body, which are often very negative, probably was very prevalent.
It heightened mental clarity and helped fuel long discussions and debates. By providing spaces where ideas could be freely exchanged, coffeehouses fueled the revolutions that created our modern world. Therefore, coffee stimulated the brain while coffeehouses allowed private thought to be turned into public debate.
They prove that lasting change does not always begin on battlefields or in palaces, but often in public spaces where people are free to think, speak, and challenge authority, revolutionizing a society. So the next time you're enjoying the free Wi-Fi and a cup of joe at your favorite coffee house, you might speculate on what revolutionary ideas might be brewing right there, maybe even your own.